we are back with our next handicapper on the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast, Kyle Hunter, and we're going from 357 down to 386 on the Sportsmemo odds screen, so feel free to follow along breaking down these games. But Kyle, how's it going? Welcome into the podcast.
Thanks for having me back again.
Yeah, glad to have you on. Interested to get your opinion here on a bunch of these games. And guys, we have a coupon code with Kyle. It's Hunter20. That's Hunter. His last name, Hunter20, for $20 off any all-access package at sportsmemo.com. Kyle, let's start off at the top here. 357, 358, Georgia Southern at New Mexico State. Looks like Georgia Southern laying 11 on the road, 55 the total.
Yeah, so this is, first of all, I think this is a great example for why it's good to do the Every Game on the Board podcasts. You know, you listen to just about any other podcast, you're not going to hear talk about Georgia Southern and New Mexico State. And I think that's one of the best reasons to listen here to this Sports Memo podcast. You know, Georgia Southern, the slowest paced team in the country by a wide margin. In between plays, they're using about 33 seconds. So they're really running that clock down. New Mexico State is fourth in pace in the country. This is one of those clash of styles games. I like games like this, both in college basketball and college football. You want to see who's going to get their style of play, who's going to get the tempo they want. I think Georgia Southern is a team that's going to possess the ball for a long time here. They're going to run almost every single play. New Mexico State 103rd in the nation in rushing defense. I think the other key to this game is there's heavy wind in this game, about 20 miles per hour forecast here. And for all the listeners, make sure you pay attention to the weather reports this week. A lot of weather that could affect these games. Wind is the best thing to have to play an under, no doubt about that. I think that this weather would make me lean toward Georgia Southern as well, because if you're running the triple option constantly, you don't really care how windy it is. But if you're trying to throw the ball around like New Mexico State does, that's going to hurt you. So my leans here would be the under and also Georgia Southern.
Kyle, I have a question for you on this game because I lost on Georgia Southern versus Texas State last week, and it almost has a little bit of the same profile as far as Georgia Southern heading on the road. Does that scare you off of this one? Just kind of like similar profiles with Georgia State kind of doing the same thing again?
You know, I think that Georgia Southern's one of those teams that has been an up-and-comer this year. They had their bad showing last week. I think it would make me like them a little bit more here. I think that they should be more focused. New Mexico State, a team that has been disappointing all throughout the year. I know they have a lot of injuries on the defensive end. So I would say, as long as you trust Georgia Southern, as long as you think that what they did earlier this year was what they really are instead of last week. They definitely had a disappointing game last week, but I do think this is a good team.
All right, good stuff, man. We'll head down the card. 359, 360, Utah State at Wyoming. Looks like the Aggies from Utah State on the highway laying 50.5 the total.
Yeah, this total's moved down a lot this week. We've had some big steam on the under here. I would agree with that move. I certainly would have liked the under better at 55, 54 than at 50.5. My lean would still be the under here. This is an interesting game in that Utah State, one of those teams that was poised for a breakout. They finally have a veteran team. Jordan Love played a lot last year as a youngster at quarterback, and now he's really playing well at quarterback for them. Utah State has always had a good defense. They're 11th in the nation in yards per play allowed this year, and they just haven't had the offense to match it in the past. Now they do. They're 15th in the nation in yards per play on offense. So this Utah State team is really good. They're plus 13 in sack margin. You've got a Wyoming team who has been a pretty good team the last couple seasons. They are just terrible on offense this year, just dreadful numbers offensively. 124th in the nation in yards per play. The Cowboys have a solid defense. They can usually stay in the game by playing good defense, running the football constantly, and not making their quarterback do much of anything. But I think it's going to be hard for them to keep up with Utah State here. One thing I did want to point out, Utah State getting just about all the bets in this game. That always makes me a little bit leery of laying the points when you're getting 87% of the bets on Utah State, 88% of the money on Utah State. So everybody wants Utah State here. I can't blame them. That if I had to play this side, I would take Utah State. But Wyoming has a really good home field advantage. There's no doubt about that. Utah State due for a letdown at some point here. So I'd be a little bit cautious about laying the points, and I would lean to the under.
Yeah, Wyoming's home field advantage, the highest elevation in all of Division I college football. Let's move down the card here. 361, 362, Fresno State at New Mexico. 12.5 is what Fresno's laying on the road here. 52 the total, Kyle.
So this is one of the games that confuses me the most as far as the line moves. My power ratings has this one a good amount higher than this. I like Fresno here. I don't know why there's been so much steam here on New Mexico this week. I think New Mexico has certainly played better of late. They have Jones in at quarterback. He's played a little bit better than the guys they had earlier this year. And earlier this year, New Mexico had said that they wanted to throw the ball a lot more. They wanted to air it out a little bit. Now they're kind of settling back into running the football. It didn't work throwing the football constantly, so they're back to running. It seems like the market wants to back New Mexico based on that win a couple weeks ago against UNLV. I think that was more about UNLV than it was about New Mexico. UNLV was without Rogers in that game, and I think that made a huge difference there. Fresno State has done nothing wrong. They've played extremely well all throughout the course of the season. This is a team that's extremely well coached. I certainly lean Fresno State pretty heavily in this game.
Guys, we got Kyle Hunter with us, and he has an NBA special for $99. You get a full month of NBA service with the NBA just starting. It's something to check out at sportsmemo.com. Kyle does college football, NBA as well. We got Western Michigan, Central Michigan here, Kyle. It looks like Western Michigan open 5.5, down to 3.5 now at some shops. So we got some Chippewa money coming into the market, but 55 the total. How would you look to bet Western Michigan, and Central Michigan?
So this one is another one of the weather games. So very strong winds forecast during this game, even a chance of some showers. So it's hard to not lean to the under. That's certainly my lean in this game. Both of the teams play relatively slowly as far as tempo. Western Michigan's been a good over team just because their defense is so bad and they have a really good offense. And then you flip over to Central Michigan, they've been a good under team because they're so bad on offense, but they're pretty good on defense. To me, this is a tough game from a side standpoint. This directional Michigan game, it's, you hate to lay too many points. I don't know about you, Drew. I mean, when you see these rivalry games, don't you think it's hard to lay too many points in these rivalry games?
I do. I do take it into account. However, sometimes, if one team just quit, like you brought up UNLV, they're a team I've kind of circled. I'm definitely not betting on them. It's kind of a one-way road. So if you feel that at all with Central Michigan, I wouldn't necessarily talk you off of it. But no, I see what you're saying. Rivalry game, keep that into account. Don't lay too much.
Right. Yeah, I think that this is one of those where it's hard for me to take a side in this game, and my only lean here is the under.
All right, let's move out to the Pac-12, 365, 366, Arizona at UCLA. Man, I don't know what happened to UCLA last week, but they came out of some, I had Cal in the Golden Nugget contest, took the L on that one. But either way, it looks like Arizona catching 10 on the highway, 57 the total in this one.
So I have to tell you, I have no interest in betting this game at all. This would be one that I think we could go through quicker. This I know it doesn't make for exciting breakdown for listeners, but I think it's an important point to make that there are a ton of games on this college football card. You don't have to be a hero and try to force a play that's not there. I don't see any value here. I will say UCLA off that big win, that was really gifted to them by Cal. That game was even on first downs, nearly even on yards, but a 37-7 final. UCLA with no turnovers and Cal with 5 turnovers. Cal just hasn't been able to get out of their own way lately, and I think that was more about Cal just handing it to them than anything else.
Well, we get the 4 games in a row here, all out west in the Pac-12, and the biggest one. It's an interesting one. I believe game day is going to be there in Pullman, Washington. It's kind of an interesting tidbit because of that flag that's been going around. It should be a great atmosphere. I believe it's the first time game day has been to Pullman, Washington. But Breaking down the game, we got Oregon at Washington State, 68 the total, with the Cougars laying 3 at home.
Yeah, it is the first time for College Game Day, and Washington State has a good home field advantage to start with, so I would think it'd be even a lot better in this one. You get a night game, at least a night game on the East Coast, 7:30 game. A lot of people are going to be watching this game. It's going to be a really good environment for football. Unlike the last one where I didn't have much of an opinion, I do like this game. I like Washington State here quite a bit. I think this situation sets up really well for them. You have Oregon, who's played some really tough games here of late, multiple tight games. They had that loss that obviously they should have never lost to Stanford. They bounced back from that, play really well. I think they should be commended for playing well coming off a loss like that. And then last week they go into overtime and beat Washington. To me, Oregon has to have a spot where they don't play as well one of these weeks. These are college kids. They're not going to be able to get up and play their best game every single game. Washington State had a bye before this game. I think Washington State comes into this game in a great situation. If you're just a situational handicapper, you have to like Washington State in this game. And, that's not the only reason I would like them here. I think that Washington State really airs it out. Everybody knows that, if Washington State's going to run the football, it's just kind of for show. We all know they want to throw the football. Oregon's defense, very good against the run, weak against the pass. I think this sets up poorly for Oregon's defense. Washington State's defense has surprised me to the upside so far this year. I've been impressed at how well they've played after losing their defensive coordinator from last year. They've just, been a very solid defense again this season. Obviously, I think there's going to be quite a few points in this game. The total would suggest that, both teams playing quickly. But I think this sets up as a really nice spot here for Washington State.
Moving down the card, we got Colorado at Washington, 49.5 the total. Looks like Washington laying 16.5 at home. Would you look to get the big points here with the Buffs, Kyle?
Yeah, this is a hard game for me. I had Colorado, one of my losers last weekend. I did have a solid weekend in college football, but one of my losers last weekend was Colorado and USC over the total. I watched that entire game. I was really disappointed in the Colorado offense. To be fair to them, they have some major injuries. Colorado's Laviska Shenault, wide receiver, definitely their most important player on offense, questionable with the toe injury in this game. You're going to want to know if he's playing before you take anything, especially if you're interested in Colorado here. But to me, Colorado's offense did a lot too much of that dinking and dunking. There wasn't enough downfield passing against USC. USC's defense knew what was coming. Colorado's offense really couldn't do anything at all until the fourth quarter when USC had a decent-sized lead. On the other side, though, you've got a Washington team who obviously wanted to get to the playoffs this season. I mean, I don't think they would have any lower goals than that. And now that's not going to happen. They could certainly still win the Pac-12, but Washington's not going to get in the playoffs. The Pac-12 is not a good enough conference for them to get in there with those losses. How do they respond to that? I think that's certainly a question mark. My power ratings would suggest to take Washington, but I'm always cautious of taking a team that's just had their bubble burst. This is a team that was playing for a lot, and now they can't get that. So I don't think Colorado's as good as their record, and I think it's a difficult spot here for Washington.
Staying in the Pac-12, we got the aforementioned Cal Bears, who can't get their feet out from under them at Oregon State here. So one of the bottom teams in the Pac-12, they're going to be playing this week. Hopefully get, at least for Cal's perspective, get back on track. But they're having to lay 7 in the hook on the highway, 58.5 the total, Kyle.
Yeah, the only way I would lean in this game is the over. And the thing that scares me about this is that Cal has been able to move the football in several games this year, but they can't punch it in. They turn it over so often. I do think that this Oregon State defense is bad enough that they should be able to score quite a bit here. Oregon State 128th out of 130 in yards per play allowed so far this year, so a really bad defense. They're 128th in run defense, and California's strength is running the football. They haven't had any quarterback step up and do a good job. Quarterback spot has been a big problem for Cal all season. Oregon State, on the other side, they've certainly been better on offense than I thought they would be. They've been able to run the football pretty well. They're 44th in the nation in yards per carry. The Cal defense is a pretty solid defense. If you just look at Cal's defense and say they've been giving up quite a few points, the biggest reason they've been giving up quite a few points is because their offense has put them in some really bad positions. If I had to take a side here, I would take Cal, just thinking that they can't be a -5 turnover margin every single game. That should regress a little bit toward the mean. Having said that, they've been really bad at taking care of the ball here pretty consistently. So, I don't know if I want to go heavy on that. I do think that both teams play with enough pace here, and this total is low enough that I would lean to the over.
Kyle, let's head to the ACC. We got Wake Forest at Florida State, 59 the total, FSU laying 10.5 at home. I'll tell you, with this FSU team, obviously they haven't been good this year, but they are off of a bye. It was a spot where I circled looking to bet on them, but I wasn't looking to bet on them laying double digits, man. So
right.
I haven't gotten there. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, I don't blame you. That's I kind of thought, maybe we'll have a spot to back Florida State coming up, and then I saw this number and I said, no way, I can't do that. The interesting thing here is, Florida State's obviously better than what they've looked so far this year. They have to play better. I guess the question is, what do you think of Willie Taggart? Do you view Willie Taggart as a solid coach, or do you think the jury's out on him?
I think he's a pretty good coach. Being able to build the programs. A lot of people will point at his, his overall record not being that great, but you got to take into account, he was building the program the first couple years, not as good. I will tell you this, he's got Walt Bell as his OC, who in my opinion is one of, if not the best up and coming offensive coordinator in the country. He's got to release the play calling duties to Walt Bell, because I'm not a big fan, Kyle, of head coaches calling plays. I think they got too much on their mind, too much management responsibilities. I don't like that kind of scenario, and so that's one thing I think he needs to let go, because this is the biggest profile job he's ever had, and having to do that on top of it, I think is holding back the program. So overall, I think he's got a shot to be a great coach, but at this point, no, I would pump the brakes on saying he's a good coach now. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that he's done a good job in smaller schools than this, and in smaller conferences than this. I think the jury's out on him being a good coach as far as a school like Florida State. At this point, I would put him below an average coach. To me, what you said about the offensive coordinator too, I agree with. I think that Taggart is trying to do too much, and it's not working. He has a good offensive mind there. Go ahead and use it. Having said all that, I think that Florida State should be better on offense coming off that bye week. Wake Forest defense is very weak. We know that. Wake Forest third in the nation in tempo. Florida State, they want to play fast. I've read some press clippings where Taggart says that he wants them to play faster than they have lately. I think this is a good spot for them if they want to play fast. If they want a shootout, here we go. Certainly my lean in this game would be the over, and I see there's been some money come in toward the under, even 58.5, 59 on the total. I have to lean over on this game.
Okay, moving to the MAC now. We got some action. Bowling Green at Ohio. Looks like 70 the total. Both of these two teams going to push it. 17 is what the Bobcats are laying at home. You see any value here on the underdog Bowling Green?
I think this is a hard one because Bowling Green just fired their coach. Now they have an interim head coach in Carl Pelini in his first game. I know some people really like to back teams after they just fired their coach. I think this is a hard one. I'd be curious to get your take on what you do in this situation too. In the NFL, when a team has not liked who they've been playing for and it's pretty clear they didn't respect that coach, I'd like to back the team the first game after that. In college football, I think it's hard to know if that team's going to be fired up to play for the new guy, or if they're just a bad team. We don't know if Bowling Green's just a bad team, or if they weren't playing hard enough for their previous coach, Mike Jenks. So to me, I'm just curious your take on what you do with these interim head coaches.
I mean, I don't know, because I don't think Bowling Green quit. They weren't a team that quit.
Right.
They kept playing hard. I actually had them circled to bet on, and losing the head coach, Carl Pelini. I get these guys mixed up. He's the one from Nebraska, or was he the head coach for FAU?
Yeah, he was the FAU coach.
Okay, I think he's a pretty good coach. He got fired from FAU for, I believe it was like drinking with underage people or something like that. It wasn't like football.
It was an off the field, yeah.
So, I mean, as far as his, on field, getting kids pumped up, I wouldn't look at that as being an issue. So, I would actually think it is a bet on. I don't know. How do you view it?
Yeah, to me, I wouldn't just blanket statement say I want to bet on a team that just fired their coach. However, in this case, if I were taking a side, I would take Bowling Green plus the points, because I think Carl Pelini will do a better job than Mike Jenks did. Not necessarily because I think Bowling Green's really a good team, but you're catching 17 points right now at Bookmaker, and catching 17 against an Ohio team that has been pretty questionable this year. I think they've been very disappointing compared to what people thought they would be. Another reason why I would think I would lean toward the underdog here, this is another one of the weather games. Could be some 12 to 15 mile per hour winds. That's enough to make a difference. And, if you think about it, this game has a high total. I would lean to the under. It's certainly a scary bet based on how bad these defenses are. But anytime you get a really high number and wind, I would lean to the under. But if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense to play underdogs, especially big underdogs, in the wind as well, because that kind of equalizes things out a little bit.
Absolutely. Good points there, Kyle. We got 377, 378 heading to the Sun Belt. Texas State at UL Monroe. Looks like Monroe laying 10.5, 60 the total, Kyle.
Texas State's problem this year is they can't keep their quarterback upright. Minus 13 in sack margin. We'll see what they can do here. I know the Monroe defense is very weak. 126 out of 130 in yards per play allowed. This is not a game I'm very interested in from a side standpoint. I think it's hard to lay a lot of points with UL Monroe with that defense being that bad. This is a Monroe defense that has given up a lot to everybody. It's not just been one team burned them. They've just been bad on defense every single week. At the same time, Texas State is one of those programs that you just keep feeling like they should get over the hump. I know they've recruited better than a lot of the other Sun Belt schools, and yet they keep being bad every single year. I know a lot of people have been waiting on them to be an improved team, go up to kind of the middle of the Sun Belt, and it hasn't happened yet. So I don't know what to do with Texas State. I know Monroe is not a good defense to be laying this many points. I do think Monroe will score quite a few in this game. So maybe you look to the over, but this is a spot where I think it's hard to take a side in this one.
We got Minnesota at Nebraska. Looks like 54 the total, with the Cornhuskers laying 3.5 at home in Lincoln.
Yeah, this is an interesting game because Minnesota played really well against Ohio State last week. Even the final score of 30-14, I believe it was, Minnesota really played better than that score would indicate. Ohio State was fortunate to win the game, let alone win by 16. That was a very misleading final score. Minnesota better in yards per play than Ohio State last week. Very impressed with Minnesota's ability to stop the run of Ohio State. Nebraska has certainly played better here of late. They haven't been able to get over the top. This is a difficult game because I feel like Minnesota could have a bit of a letdown from last game. They certainly put a lot into that game at Ohio State. On the other hand, Nebraska, they're certainly due to win one, but they've found a lot of ways to lose. I think if I had to play this game, I would play Nebraska minus the points at this point. This was one of those games where it started at 5, now it's 3.5. Maybe I would have leaned toward Minnesota on the opening number and just a slight lean toward Nebraska now. So that just tells you I don't have any strong feel for this game.
All right, Kyle, heading to the American Conference, we got UConn at USF. Looks like UConn laying 69. 34 is what South Florida's laying in Tampa. How do you look to bet this one?
Yeah, UConn's defense, just a terrible defense. You could just go through all the defensive stats, and I don't know how much time do we have here. I could just go through all of UConn's defensive stats, and we could just make the show about that. It's really ridiculous. But 58 plays of 20 yards or more. in 6 games. I mean, they've given up 20 yards or more 58 times in 6 games. That's almost unheard of, and nobody else is even close to that so far this year. They're allowing 9.3 yards per play. So essentially they're allowing a first down every play. That's hard to do, but they've been able to do it. 11.13 yards per pass attempt, worst in the country by about a yard per attempt. I've wondered why they haven't made some kind of change at defense. What they're doing isn't working at all. I think UConn has some potential on offense. South Florida laying this many points, they've already had some letdown spots this year to where it looks like they kind of play down to their competition. I'd hate to lay this many points. I know South Florida is going to score a lot of points here, maybe take a team total over for South Florida or look to the over in this game, 68.5, 69. I know that's a lot of points, but in a UConn game, I could never take the under.
Kyle, we got a good one here in the Big 12. It's noon Eastern start, so this one will be on the early slate. Oklahoma at TCU. Looks like OU laying 7.5 or 8, so you want to shop around. Seeing Chris Sportsbooks at 7.5. Also in Vegas, South Point is. Pretty much everywhere else at 8. But either way, how would you look to bet the Sooners at TCU? Seeing 7.5, 8, 62 the total.
So the first thing I thought when I saw this line was I want to take TCU. I wanted a reason to take TCU plus the points. Gary Patterson, a really good coach. He's very good at getting his team up in this underdog role. If you look at his long term, he's done very well in the underdog role. And then you look at the other side, though. Oklahoma has a bye week to get ready for this game after losing to Texas. So this really should be a good spot for Oklahoma as well. You should get a max effort from them. As many teams have been losing at the top, Oklahoma's not totally out of this playoff picture. So I think they still have plenty to play for. TCU, a good underdog team, but TCU's turned the ball over a lot this year. Like I said, I wanted a reason to take TCU. The more I looked at this game, the more I wanted to pass on the side. I would lean to the under. I think most people here would want to play over with Oklahoma and TCU. I imagine that Gary Patterson's going to want to try to control the ball, keep Oklahoma's offense off the field. I don't think TCU wants to get in a shootout with Oklahoma. Obviously, if Oklahoma jumps ahead early, then it could be hard for him to avoid that. But I think TCU will want to try to slow this game down and make it lower scoring. So I think the total's a little bit too high here.
Last game here, Kyle, we got North Texas, the Mean Green at UAB, 54.5 the total, with the Blazers laying 1.5 at home in Birmingham.
First of all, I think this is a really good game. Both of these teams have been kind of under the radar, but both very good teams. North Texas and UAB do it different ways, though. This is a UAB team that runs almost all the time. North Texas does it with Mason Fine, throwing the ball around. North Texas was a team that had a good balanced offense last year. They had Wilson at running back last year. They're without him now. He graduated, and their running game has just been pretty disappointing this season. UAB, on the flip side, very good running the football, not able to throw the ball very much. North Texas has stopped the run very well. They're in the top 15 in the country in yards per carry allowed so far this year. But I think the caveat to that is let's look at who North Texas has played. I don't think they've really played anybody that can run the ball very much at all. So I think the jury's still out on them. It's one of those cautionary notes that when you look at these yards per play, yards per carry, things like that, you have to look at who they played also, because just saying, well, this is a great run defense, well, maybe they're not. This is their time that we'll see. If they stop UAB really well here, then you can say that, but I don't think they've proven that yet. UAB is an easy team to root for based on, Bill Clark staying around here. They were without a football program for so long. Then they come back and they just surprise everybody right away. If you've been betting UAB every week for the last couple of years, you've done really well. I think my lean in this game would be to take UAB and lay the 1.5, 2 points that it is right now. If I had a lean on the total, it would be the under. I think that UAB plays slowly, and they also are going to run the ball so much. We're going to see a lot of moving clock in this game. And UAB's pass defense has been pretty solid this year, and that's what North Texas's strength is. So overall, I think this is a really good game under the radar. So if you get a chance to get your eyes on this game, I think you should try to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. 7:30 Eastern kick. Sleeper in Conference USA, North Texas UAB. Good one to finish it on, guys. Remember, Kyle's NBA special for $99. He's also got a 5% college football play up. He's been killing it there with his top plays in college football. And his promo code is Hunter, his last name, HUNTER 20, for $20 off any all-access service. Guys, we'll be right back with Robbie Vino to finish off the card here with the college football every game on the board podcast.